In the last video, we had a look at importing audio and clips into either the layers section here or the editor section using the load clip functions and the drag and drop. In this video, I wanted to pay some special focus and attention to the analysis section when it comes to separating your layers with the loops that you import into Regroover Pro. So I've gone ahead here and I've chosen a very basic beat over here. We'll go ahead and press play so we can just addition this. Okay, so the idea here is that I want to go ahead, I want to import this loop, and then I want to be able to make some adjustments and hopefully split these layers up as best as I can. So one thing you'll notice right off the bat is we have a 110 BPM in our loop, and my Studio One session is set to 115. Now keep your eye on the sync settings over here, what happens when I drag this loop in. So go ahead and drag that in. It's done an analysis over here. And now if I was to go ahead and play this, we'll go ahead and put our metronome on. And actually, I'm just going to make sure that I turn this down a little bit because it's pretty loud. And we'll go ahead and we'll listen to these two against each other. And I'm going to just play from the plugin GUI as opposed to my DAW. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and play from my DAW. And we're going to hear the click track as well. Okay, so you'll notice that it went ahead and it took this 110 BPM loop and it went ahead and it synced that to our BPM. Now, if I was to change this to something like, for example, let's change it to 112, you see that our sync is flashing here. It indicates your audio clip is currently synced to 115 BPM. Press sync if you want your audio clip to match the host BPM. We definitely do. It's gone ahead and it's reanalyzed that, and now our loop will be in sync with our host DAW tempo. Okay, so a bit of an odd BPM, but what the heck, let's leave it at that for now. I'm going to go ahead and turn my click off in my DAW, and what I want to focus on in this video is how we can use the layers and the activity sliders in order to get some different results, potentially better results, or maybe just different results in terms of splitting up our layers. Now, as mentioned in a previous video, the idea with Regroover Pro is that when you split your layers, when you drag a loop in here and it does the auto detection, based on the analysis settings that we have in the upper right-hand corner over here, is that the summed result of those four layers will equal the stereo mixdown that you dragged in. So this is what we're playing right now. Now in theory, this should not sound any different to this beat that we've dragged in over here. Okay, a little bit of a volume difference there, but that's because I have my addition gain turned down in my Studio One browser. All right, so let's go ahead. We can use some of these shortcuts that we learned from the previous video, being Shift and Command or Control, to solo out one of these layers. Okay, so you can hear we have the sustain, a little bit of the attack, but mostly the sustain of the snare drum on layer 1. Let's go ahead and listen to layer 2. Okay, so we have some additional information there as well. Now let's listen to layer 3. And one more time. And last but not least, let's listen to layer 4. So you can hear these different elements. So for example, we have some of the attacks over here. Let's actually solo out layer 3. We'll go ahead and play that. Okay. Now we'll go ahead and we'll solo out layer 4. So you can hear we have most of the hi-hats on layer 4. We have the attack of both the kick drum and the snare on layer 3. Let's solo out layer 2. Okay, so we have the attack of the kick drum and we have a little bit of sustain of the snare. And layer 1, if memory serves, is primarily the decay or the sustain of the snare. So the idea with the way that the analysis controls work is they aim to separate things into different frequencies of what Regroover Pro, or the algorithm of Regroover Pro, determines to be certain elements that belong together. Now, if you're not happy with the result that you're getting with this split, there are a couple things that we can do, and that's what we're going to focus on now. So the first thing that we can do is we can actually change the analysis in terms of the amount of layers that things are split up into. So for example, right now we're looking at 4 different layers. We got layer 1, 2, 3, and 4. If I wanted to change this, let's say that I had something where I had more elements in my loop. So for example, discrete elements that, fingers crossed, could hopefully be separated better. Then I could simply dial up the amount of layers. Now, the minute you make a change to any of these sections, whether you adjust the layer slider or the activity slider, you'll notice we have the split button that is flashing, and it's become illuminated in this green or aqua color. Let's go ahead and resplit this. And now instead of having 4 layers, Regroover Pro will split it into 5. We'll go ahead and just click OK. Okay, so now we have 5 layers split up. Let's go ahead. I'm going to use my solo just to listen to these different layers. Let's have a listen. Okay, so we have a hi-hat layer over here, which is primarily pretty isolated. Okay, we've got the attack of the kick and the snare. Let's listen to layer 3. Looks like it's predominantly the sustain of the snare over here. It looks like we have a little bit of the kick as well. Let's have a listen. Okay, we also have a little bit of the hi-hat there. Now we'll listen to layer 4. Okay, those are snare elements, and now let's listen to layer 5. Okay, so you can see we have a pretty good split there in terms of these different elements. Now, one other thing that we could do, in addition to changing our layers or the amount of layers, is we could also change the activity slider. So from low to high. Now, there's really not that much going on here. Let's change this to low, and let's change this back to 4, and let's do a split. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. So now we've changed it to 4 layers, which is the minimum allowed, and we've changed our activity from medium to low. Now it's worth mentioning that the default positions that these sliders come up, they usually work pretty good most of the time, but let's have a listen to this now. I'm going to use my solo commands. Okay, we'll move over to layer 2, layer 3, and last but not least, let's move to layer 4. Okay, so you can kind of hear what's happening over here. Like, for example, if we solo layer 3 over here, you can see that we have a lot of this low-end content, which exists in both the snare and the kick. We have that pretty much isolated on its own layer. So this is how we can use the analysis tools to help with our splits. And like I say, depending on how busy your loop is, it's worth experimenting with different amounts of layers and also with different levels in terms of from low to high on the activity slider, because it can really help when you're splitting and isolating your layers. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this off for now. And in the next video, we're going to take a look at using the annotation tool, which is located right over here, to further help us isolate these different layers and do a little bit of editing so that we can really get these sitting on discrete layers in terms of separating our elements in this loop. So I'll catch up with you in the next video.